Hi, today is January 20th, and we are continuing to walk through the Bible, answering the questions, who am I, who is God, and what the heck are we doing together? We're reading Genesis in chapter 41, 17 to 42, 17, Matthew 13, 24 to 46, Psalm 18, 1 through 15, and Proverbs 4, 1 through 6. And Joseph is in the palace. Pharaoh has found out that even though nobody that he knows can interpret the dreams, somebody tells him, Joseph in prison has the Spirit of God and he can interpret your dreams. Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dreams. He had two dreams, and one of the dreams was about fat cows getting eaten up by scrawny cows and good wheat being eaten up by scrawny, sickly wheat. And Joseph said both of these dreams mean the same thing. God is telling Pharaoh in advance what he's about to do. So he says the seven fat cows and the seven fat, healthy grain is 7 years of plenty. You're going to have 7 years of plenty, but then you're going to have 7 years of famine that is going to eat up the 7 years of plenty, and you're going to be in trouble. So he says God has revealed this to Pharaoh in advance so that, you could do something about it. So he suggests that Pharaoh gets an administrator and save the plenty, save the extra in the years of plenty so that they'll have what they need in the years of famine. So in verse 37, Joseph's suggestions were well received by Pharaoh and his officials. So Pharaoh asked his officials, can we find anybody else like this man so obviously filled with the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has revealed the meaning of the dreams to you, clearly no one else is as intelligent or as wise as you are. You will be in charge of my court, and all my people will take orders from you. Only I, sitting on my throne, will have a rank higher than yours. Does that sound familiar? He was a slave in Potiphar's house, and Potiphar, God was with Joseph, and Potiphar put him in charge of everything. And the only thing Potiphar had to worry about was what to eat. And then, no fault of his own, Joseph gets put in prison, and God is with him, and he does an excellent job. And the prison warden puts him in charge of everything, except, nobody is higher than Joseph except the prison warden. And then Pharaoh, he puts Joseph in charge of all of Egypt, and nobody is higher than Joseph in rank than the Pharaoh. God is so incredible. He took Joseph down, 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 and he humbled him. And Joseph humbled himself, and then God just ricocheted him up to the highest he can go. But he was still doing the same exact thing that he was doing in Potiphar's house and in the prison. He still was doing exactly what God made him to do, and God was blessing. God was blessing him. So Pharaoh put Joseph in charge of all of Egypt. And then he gave him a new name. His Egyptian name means God speaks and he lives. Pharaoh was in Egypt. Egypt had many, many gods. And here's a testimony of the one God that speaks and lives. So Joseph took charge of the entire land of Egypt. He was 30 years old. He was 17 when he had his dreams. And now he's 30. And it took a little while. Can you imagine Joseph in all of these difficult positions? And it would be so tempting to feel hopeless, and there's just no way out, and it just keeps getting worse and worse. And where is God? He's abandoned me, and I'm all alone. Nobody loves me. Everybody hates me. I'm gonna go home and eat some worms. And he could have made such terrible, terrible decisions, but he kept righteous, and he kept growing, and he kept becoming humble, and God is blessing him. As predicted, they had years of plenty, and Joseph took all of the extra grain and put it in storage, and then there was years of famine, and everybody ran out of food, and they came to Joseph, not just Egypt, but also the world, the nations around him. He's had two children. One of them, the name is Manasseh, and Manasseh means God has made me forget all my troubles and everyone in my father's family. So God has made me forget all of my troubles. It's like the joy of having childbirth. Like it's a lot of pain to have a child, but the joy of having that baby in your arms you forget all of the pain that happened before that. Joseph named his second son Ephraim, for he said, God has made me fruitful in this land of my grief. Do you remember Isaac was fruitful in the land of famine? Here's Joseph, and he's fruitful even in his land of grief. Then the 7 years of famine had begun, just as Joseph and God had predicted. So then it's, so people came and said, can we buy the extra? Can we buy the grain? And Pharaoh said, go to Joseph and do whatever he tells you to do. So Joseph's family back in Canaan finds out they've got food, and Jacob sends his sons to Joseph, or actually to Egypt. He doesn't know Joseph's there. And because Joseph was the governor of all Egypt, in charge of selling grain to all the people, it was to him that his brothers came, and they bowed low. Instantly Joseph recognized them. They did not recognize Joseph, and he remembered the dreams that he had had many years before. 17 to 30, that's a long time to wait for a dream to come to pass and a prophecy to come to fruition. But Joseph was faithful, and he's a little rough with his brothers, and we won't go into that. Matthew chapter 13 talks about the kingdom of heaven. Many parables talks about the kingdom of heaven. Jesus was always talking about the kingdom of heaven. And I said, the kingdom of heaven is like a farmer who planted good seed in his field. But that night, as the workers slept, his enemy came and planted weeds among the wheat, then slipped away. When the crop began to grow and produce grain, the weeds also grew. The farmer's workers went to him and said, Sir, the field where you planted that good seed is full of weeds. Where did they come from? An enemy has done this, the farmer exclaimed. And it wasn't the farmer's fault. He was just sleeping. He had done his job, but the enemy had come and planted the tares. And they said, should we pull out the weeds? They asked. And the farmer said, no, you'll uproot the wheat if you do. Let both grow together until the harvest. Then I will tell the harvesters to sort out the weeds, tie them into bundles, and burn them, and to put the wheat in the barn. Here is another illustration. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed planted in a field. It's the smallest of all seeds, but it becomes the largest, and it basically takes over the garden. Jesus used this illustration. The kingdom of heaven is like a yeast a woman uses in making bread. Even though she puts a little tiny bit in there, it permeates the whole dough. It changes everything in it. So Joseph was one man that changed everything, just like the yeast in the bread. He changed the world that he lived in. The field, the interpretation of the first parable is the field is the good seed, represents the kingdom, the people of the kingdom. The weeds are the people who belong to the evil one. The enemy who planted the weeds among the wheat is the devil, and the harvesters at the end of the age are the angels. Just as the weeds are sorted out and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the world. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will remove from his kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil. And the angel will throw them into the fiery furnace. God is the judge. I have to decide if I want to eat of the tree of life that was talked about in the Garden of Eden, or if I want to go my own way and do my own thing and eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But there is a judgment day. It's going to look the same in this world, and some people who are eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil look like they're doing better than the people who eat from the tree of life. But in the end, God is going to judge, and the ones that are eating from the tree of life and are living with God and having God with them are going to have the kingdom of heaven. And it says, the righteous will shine like the sun in their Father's kingdom. Anyone with ears to hear should listen and understand. Still, again, anyone with ears to hear. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure that a man discovers hidden in a field. In his excitement, he hid it again and sold everything he owned to get enough money to buy the field. So what happens is that the kingdom of heaven is worth selling everything for. It's such a treasure. It doesn't always look like a treasure. It looks like a field, but it's worth everything. Sell everything. So I live by that. I taught that But then one day the Holy Spirit flipped it around on me and he said, Jesus Christ is the man. You're the treasure in the field. And Jesus gave everything to buy you back because you were that valuable to him. And it was a joy. Hebrews says it was a joy for him to go to the cross and basically to buy the treasure back. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant who found a pearl of great price. He sold everything. It's worth everything. And Psalms 18:1-15 talks about our relationship. It talks about God. And I encourage you to read it for yourself. Proverbs chapter 4 talks about wisdom. Listen to wisdom and it will protect you, love wisdom, and it will guard you. So I encourage you today. I'm going to make a video about the treasure in the field. I give diamonds out to remind you that you're a treasure. So look for that video. But I just really, really, really want to just have ears to hear how valuable, how treasured you are. No matter what anybody says, even you. No matter what anybody does, even you. You're still a treasure worth giving everything for. Jesus Christ died for you. Have a blessed day.